The snow didn't care that she was pregnant. The mountain didn't care that she'd been left behind like garbage. And the man who'd sworn to love her? He was already miles away, probably laughing. Lena Voss pressed her back against the station wall, feeling the cold seep through her coat and into her bones. 38 years old, 7 months pregnant, and completely alone at a train station that looked like it had been forgotten by the world decades ago. This is her story, raw, brutal, and real. If you want to see how far survival can take a woman who refuses to break, stay until the end. Drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The last train had left 3 hours ago. Lena knew because she'd watched it pull away, its red taillights disappearing into the white nothing of the storm like dying embers. Victor had been on it. She was sure of that now, even though part of her, the stupid, desperate part, kept scanning the platform like he might suddenly reappear with some half-assed explanation and that crooked smile he used when he wanted forgiveness without actually apologizing. He wasn't coming back. The realization settled over her like the snow, quiet, relentless, suffocating. She pulled her coat tighter, but it didn't help. The thing was threadbare, bought secondhand from a Salvation Army 3 winters ago when she'd still believed her life was temporary, that better things were just around the corner. The fabric had given up trying to keep her warm somewhere around the Colorado border. Now it just hung on her like a sick joke. The baby kicked. Lena put a hand on her stomach, feeling the movement beneath her palm. "I know," she whispered. "I know you're cold. I'm working on it." Except she wasn't. She had no plan, no money, and nowhere to go. The station, if you could even call it that, was little more than a covered platform with a bench and a vending machine that looked like it had been gutted for parts sometime during the Reagan administration. No waiting room, no attendant, no heat. Just her, the wind, and the dark. She tried the doors to what might have been an office once, but they were locked, the windows boarded over with plywood that had long since started to rot. The whole place felt abandoned, like the world had moved on and forgotten this little slice of nowhere existed. Kind of like her life. Lena sat down on the bench, ignoring the way the cold metal bit through her jeans. Her feet ached. Everything ached. She'd been standing for most of the day, first on the train, then here, waiting, hoping, pathetic. She dug into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked, had been for months, but it still worked. Barely. The battery icon blinked at 15%. No signal, of course. There'd been no signal since they'd climbed into the mountains, and Victor had told her not to worry about it, that they'd be at his cousin's place before nightfall. Another lie in a long string of them. She scrolled through her contacts anyway, even though she knew it was pointless. There was no one to call. Her mother had died when she was 16. Her father had checked out emotionally long before that and physically a few years after, courtesy of liver failure and a lifetime of cheap whiskey. She had a sister somewhere, Michigan, last she'd heard, but they hadn't spoken in over a decade, not since Lena had skipped her wedding to chase some guy to California who'd promised her the world and delivered a restraining order instead. No friends. Not real ones, anyway. Just people she'd worked with at various dead-end jobs, people she'd met in bars, people who drifted in and out of her life like smoke. And Victor. She stared at his name in her contacts. Victor Hale. She should delete it. She should have deleted it months ago when he'd first started showing up late, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, making excuses that didn't add up. But she'd held on, because what else did she have? A studio apartment with mold in the bathroom and a landlord who'd started making comments about how friendly she could be if she wanted to negotiate the rent. A job cleaning hotel rooms that paid just enough to keep her broke, but not quite enough to starve. Victor had been her way out, or so she'd thought. "Come with me," he'd said 3 weeks ago. "I've got family in the mountains. My cousin runs a logging operation. Good money, clean air, a place to raise a kid. We can start over." Start over. Those 2 words had done it. She'd wanted to believe so badly that she'd ignored every red flag, every gut feeling, every small voice in her head screaming that Victor Hale was a liar and a coward, and that she was making a mistake. And now here she was. The wind picked up, howling through the station like something alive and angry. Snow swirled across the platform in ghostly eddies. Lena watched it, feeling the cold creep deeper into her chest. She wondered, distantly, how long it would take. Hypothermia. She'd read about it once, in some article she'd stumbled across online. Your body starts shutting down. You get confused, sleepy. Eventually you just stop feeling cold at all. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. The baby kicked again, harder this time, like it knew what she was thinking and wanted to remind her that giving up wasn't an option. Okay, Lena said quietly. Okay. She forced herself to stand. Her legs protested, stiff and clumsy. She couldn't just sit here and freeze. There had to be something. A building nearby. A house. Hell, a barn would do. Anything with 4 walls and a roof. She stepped off the platform and into the snow. It was deeper than she'd expected, coming up past her ankles, soaking through her sneakers almost immediately. She should have worn boots. She should have done a lot of things. But regret was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. The station sat at the edge of what looked like a small valley, surrounded by pine trees that stood like silent sentinels in the dark. There was a road, gravel, barely visible under the snow, that curved away into the trees. No streetlights, no signs, just the road and the forest and the endless white. Lena started walking. Each step felt like a small victory and a monumental failure all at once. Her breath came out in ragged clouds. Her hands were already going numb despite being shoved deep in her pockets. The baby shifted inside her, uncomfortable, restless. We're going to be okay, she told herself. We just need to find somewhere warm. That's all. Just somewhere warm. She didn't know how long she walked. Time felt strange, stretched thin like taffy. The road wound through the trees, uphill, downhill, always surrounded by that suffocating darkness. Once, she thought she heard something, a car maybe, or a truck, but when she stopped and listened, there was only the wind. Her feet were wet. Then they were cold. Then they stopped feeling like anything at all. That's when she saw the light. At first, she thought it was her imagination, some cruel trick her oxygen-starved brain was playing. But no, there it was, faint and golden, flickering between the trees like a candle flame. Lena changed direction, stumbling off the road and into the forest. Branches grabbed at her coat. Snow fell from overhead in heavy clumps. She didn't care. The light was real. It had to be real. The trees opened up into a clearing, and there it was. A cabin. Small, rough-hewn, smoke curling from a stone chimney. Light glowed in the windows, warm and steady. Lena almost cried. She staggered forward, her legs barely holding her up. The porch was 3 steps up. She made it 2 before her knees gave out. She didn't fall. Someone caught her. Arms, strong, steady, wrapped around her, holding her up. A voice, low and calm, spoke near her ear. Easy, I've got you. Lena looked up. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had seen its share of winters. Maybe 40, maybe older. It was hard to tell in the dim light. Dark hair, streaked with gray. Eyes that didn't flinch from hers. Please, Lena managed. Her voice sounded broken even to her own ears. I don't have anywhere. You're freezing, the man said. Not a question, a fact. Come on. He didn't wait for her to answer. He just guided her up the steps and through the door, into a warmth so sudden and complete that Lena's body didn't know how to process it. Her skin burned, her lungs seized. She would have collapsed again if the man hadn't eased her into a chair near the fireplace. Sit, he said. Don't move. Lena sat. She couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. The man disappeared for a moment, then returned with a blanket. Thick, heavy, smelling faintly of wood smoke and something clean. He draped it over her shoulders, then crouched down and started unlacing her sneakers. Wait, Lena started. Your feet are soaked, he said, not looking up. You'll lose toes if we don't get you dried off. He pulled off her shoes, then her socks, both of which were stiff with ice. His hands were careful, methodical. He didn't say anything else, just worked in silence while Lena sat there, too exhausted and overwhelmed to protest. When he was done, he stood and walked to the other side of the cabin. It was all one room, she realized, with a bed in one corner, a small kitchen area in another, and the fireplace dominating the center. He came back with a towel and a pair of thick wool socks. Dry your feet, he said, handing them to her. Put these on. I'll make coffee. Lena took the towel. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. I I can't. You can drink coffee, the man said flatly. That's all I'm asking. He turned away before she could argue, moving to the kitchen area where an old percolator sat on a camp stove. The smell of coffee began to fill the cabin almost immediately, rich and dark and impossibly comforting. Lena dried her feet. They were pale, almost blue, and she couldn't feel most of her toes. The socks were too big, but they were warm, and that was all that mattered. She pulled them on, then wrapped the blanket tighter around herself and watched the man move around his cabin with the kind of easy efficiency that came from living alone for a long time. He poured 2 cups of coffee, brought one to her, kept one for himself. He didn't sit, just leaned against the wall near the fireplace and drank in silence. Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her fingers. "Thank you," she said quietly. The man nodded, didn't say anything. "I'm Lena." He took a sip of coffee. "Caleb." Silence settled over them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Lena drank her coffee and tried not to think about what came next, because there was no next. There was only now, this moment, this warmth. After a while, Caleb spoke. "You planning to tell me how you ended up half frozen on my porch?" Lena stared into her mug. "Long story. Got nowhere to be." She glanced at him. His expression was neutral, unreadable. Not kind, exactly, but not unkind either. Just present. "I was at the train station," she said finally. "The one down the mountain. I was supposed to meet someone. He didn't show. So you walked. I didn't have anywhere else to go." Caleb nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense to him. Maybe it did. "You alone?" Lena put a hand on her stomach. "Not exactly." His gaze dropped to her belly, then back to her face. Something shifted in his expression. She couldn't tell what. "How far along?" 7 months. "You see a doctor recently?" 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine." Caleb grunted. It wasn't approval or disapproval, just acknowledgement. He drained his coffee, set the mug aside. "You can stay here tonight. Storm's not letting up anytime soon." Lena's chest tightened. "I don't have any money." "Didn't ask for money." "Then what?" "Nothing," Caleb said, cutting her off. "You need a place to sleep. I've got a bed I'm not using. That's it." Lena wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. But she'd learned a long time ago that nothing in this world was free. There was always a cost. Always. "Why?" she asked. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Why not?" It wasn't an answer, but it was the only one she was going to get. He moved to the bed in the corner, a simple frame with a mattress and a pile of blankets, and started stripping off the top layer. "You take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep in the chair." "You don't have to." "I'm not arguing about this." His voice was firm but not harsh. "You're pregnant and half dead from cold. You take the bed." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no point in arguing, and honestly, she was too tired to try. She stood, wobbling slightly, and made her way to the bed. It was softer than she'd expected, the blankets heavy and warm. She sank into it like a stone dropping into water. Caleb tossed another log on the fire, then settled into the chair with his own blanket. He didn't say goodnight, didn't say anything. Lena lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crackle inside. Her mind was too full and too empty all at once. She thought about Victor, about the baby, about the fact that she was in a stranger's cabin in the middle of nowhere with no plan and no future. But she was warm, and for tonight, that would have to be enough. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion pull her under. When Lena woke, it was still dark outside. The fire had burned down to embers, casting faint orange light across the cabin. She lay still for a moment, disoriented, trying to remember where she was. Then it came back. The station, the walk, Caleb. She turned her head. He was still in the chair, asleep, his head tilted back against the wall. He looked uncomfortable as hell, but he hadn't complained, hadn't made her feel guilty, hadn't asked for anything. The baby shifted inside her, awake now, moving in slow rolls that made her stomach visibly bulge and flatten. Lena put a hand over it, feeling the life inside her. Her daughter. She'd found out the sex at her last appointment, though she hadn't told anyone. There'd been no one to tell. A girl. She was going to have a daughter. The weight of that hit her all over again. She wasn't ready. She had nothing to offer this kid. No home, no stability, no family, just her, and she was a mess on the best days. But she was all this baby had. Lena sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. Her body ached, but it was a dull ache now, manageable. The socks were still on her feet. She wiggled her toes experimentally. They hurt, but they worked. That was something. She looked around the cabin, really seeing it for the first time. It was sparse but clean. A table with 2 chairs. Shelves lined with canned goods and books. A rifle mounted above the door. Tools hanging on hooks. Everything had a place. Everything was organized. It was the home of someone who lived deliberately, who didn't waste anything. Lena's gaze landed on Caleb again. In sleep, his face looked younger, less guarded. There were lines around his eyes, though, the kind that came from squinting into the sun for years. Or maybe from smiling, once upon a time. She wondered what his story was. Why he lived up here alone. What he'd left behind, or what had left him. Not that it was any of her business. She swung her legs off the bed, intending to use the bathroom. She'd spotted a door earlier that had to lead somewhere. But the moment her feet hit the floor, Caleb's eyes opened. He didn't startle, didn't jerk awake, just went from asleep to alert in the span of a heartbeat. "Sorry," Lena whispered. "Didn't mean to wake you." Caleb sat up, rolling his shoulders. "You didn't. I'm a light sleeper." He glanced at the window where the first gray light of dawn was starting to creep through. "Storm's still going." Lena listened. He was right. The wind was still howling, snow still battering the windows. "How long do these usually last?" "Depends. Could be a day. Could be 3. 3 days. Lena's stomach dropped. "I should go." "Go where?" "I don't know. Somewhere. I can't just—" "You can't go out in that," Caleb said, standing. He was taller than she'd realized, broad enough to block the firelight. "You wouldn't make it a mile." "I can't stay here." "Why not?" Lena stared at him. "Because I'm a stranger. Because you don't know me. Because you think I'm going to ask for something." It wasn't a question. Lena's silence was answer enough. Caleb sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look, I'm not interested in whatever story you've got playing in your head. You need a place to wait out the storm. I've got a place. That's it. No strings. No expectations. When the storm clears, you can leave if you want. Until then, you're safer here than out there." He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like kindness didn't need a reason. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need his help, that she could figure it out on her own. But the truth was, she couldn't. She was trapped here, at least for now. And maybe that was okay. "Okay," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "Bathroom's through that door. There's a shower if you want it. Water's heated by the fire so it won't be hot, but it'll be warm enough." Lena blinked. "You have running water?" "Rainwater collection, filtered. It works." Of course it did. This man had built himself a life up here, self-sufficient and solid. Meanwhile, Lena could barely keep herself fed. She stood, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "Thank you." Caleb just grunted and moved to the stove to start making breakfast. The bathroom was tiny, just a sink, a toilet, and a narrow shower stall. But it was clean. Lena turned on the water and waited for it to warm up. It took longer than she expected, but when it finally did, she stepped under the spray and let it wash away the grime and fear and exhaustion. She cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears that mixed with the water and disappeared down the drain. Because she was tired. Because she was scared. Because, for the first time in months, someone had helped her without wanting something in return, and she didn't know what to do with that. When she was done, she dried off with a towel that smelled like pine and dressed in the same clothes she'd been wearing. They were wrinkled and damp, but they were all she had. She came out to find Caleb plating eggs and toast. He glanced at her, then gestured to the table. "Sit." Lena sat. The food was simple but good. Scrambled eggs with a little cheese, thick slices of toasted bread. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Caleb ate in silence across from her. When they were both done, he cleared the plates without a word and started washing them in a basin. "Can I help?" Lena asked. "You can rest." "I've been resting." Caleb paused, looking at her over his shoulder. "You're pregnant, and you nearly froze to death last night. You need to rest." I need to do something," Lena said. "I can't just sit here." Caleb studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. You can dry." They worked side by side, Caleb washing, Lena drying. It was quiet, almost meditative. Lena found herself relaxing despite everything, falling into the rhythm of it. "How long have you lived here?" she asked after a while. 5 years. "By yourself?" "Mostly." Lena waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. She tried a different angle. "Do you ever get lonely?" Caleb handed her the last plate. "Sometimes, but lonely's better than the alternative." Lena didn't ask what the alternative was. She had a feeling she already knew. The day passed slowly. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Caleb worked on various things around the cabin, sharpening tools, organizing supplies, fixing a hinge on one of the cabinets. Lena tried to help where she could, though there wasn't much she could do. Mostly, she just stayed out of the way and tried not to feel like a burden. By evening, the silence between them had shifted from awkward to comfortable. Caleb made dinner, venison stew with potatoes and carrots, and they ate together by the fire. Lena caught herself watching him, wondering what it would be like to live this way. Alone, but not lonely. Self-sufficient. Free. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Caleb looked up from his bowl. "You just did." Lena smiled despite herself. "Why'd you let me stay?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because nobody helped me when I needed it. Figured I'd do better." It wasn't the answer she'd expected, but it was honest. And honesty, Lena was learning, was a rare thing. That night, Caleb took the chair again and Lena took the bed. But this time, as she drifted off to sleep, she didn't feel afraid. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. The storm lasted 4 days. 4 days of wind that sounded like it was trying to tear the mountain apart. 4 days of snow piling up against the cabin walls until Caleb had to dig out the door every morning just so they could get to the woodshed. 4 days of being trapped inside with a man Lena barely knew, learning the rhythms of a life she'd never imagined. On the second morning, she woke to find him already gone. The fire was burning, fresh coffee sat on the stove, but Caleb was nowhere in sight. Lena sat up, a spike of panic shooting through her chest before she caught herself. He hadn't left. His coat was gone, his boots were gone, but the rifle was still mounted above the door. He was just outside, doing whatever it was he did. She poured herself coffee and stood by the window, watching the white chaos beyond the glass. After about 20 minutes, she saw him emerge from the trees, hauling a deer carcass over his shoulders like it weighed nothing. Blood dripped onto the snow, leaving a dark trail behind him. Lena turned away, feeling queasy. She'd eaten meat her whole life, but she'd never had to see where it came from, never had to think about it. When Caleb came inside, stamping snow off his boots, he glanced at her and seemed to read something in her face. "Bothers you," he said. Not a question. "No, I mean..." Lena wrapped her hands around her mug. "I'm just not used to it." "Used to what? Seeing something die so you can eat?" She bristled at that. "I know where food comes from." "Do you?" Caleb hung his coat on a hook, brushing snow from his hair. Knowing and seeing are different things. He wasn't wrong, but Lena didn't want to admit it. "I'm not naive." "Didn't say you were." He moved to the sink, washing his hands in cold water. "But you've lived your whole life in places where someone else does the killing for you. Makes it easier to pretend it doesn't happen." Lena set her mug down harder than she intended. "You don't know anything about my life." Caleb dried his hands on a towel, his expression unchanged. "You're right. I don't." He walked past her and out the door again, leaving Lena standing there feeling stupid and defensive and angry at herself for picking a fight with the only person who'd helped her in months. She spent the next hour trying to make herself useful, tidying things that didn't need tidying, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. When Caleb came back in, this time carrying firewood, she was folding a blanket that had already been folded. He set the wood down by the fireplace and looked at her. You don't have to do that. I know. Then why are you? Because I need to do something, Lena snapped. I can't just sit here like some kind of... She stopped, swallowing the rest of the sentence. Like what? Like a burden. Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then he said, You're not a burden. But if you need to feel useful, I've got work you can help with. Lena looked up. Yeah? Yeah, come on. He led her outside to a shed she hadn't noticed before, half buried in snow. Inside there were pelts hanging from hooks, stretched and drying. The smell hit her first, musky, earthy, not unpleasant, but strange. I trap, Caleb said, running a hand over one of the pelts. Sell them to a trader down the mountain twice a year. Keeps me in supplies. Lena stared at the furs. You want me to help with this? Some of these need scraping still. I can show you how. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't easy either, but it was work, and Lena found herself grateful for it. Caleb was patient, showing her how to hold the scraper, how much pressure to use, where to focus. He didn't hover, didn't correct her unless she was about to ruin something. Just let her figure it out. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the scrape of metal on hide and the wind howling outside. After a while, Lena's hand started to ache, but she didn't stop. There was something meditative about it, something grounding. How'd you learn to do all this? She asked. Caleb didn't look up from his work. Trial and error mostly, some from books, some from people who knew better. You grow up out here? No, I grew up in a place that looked a lot like everywhere else. Suburbs, strip malls. People who smiled at you but didn't mean it. He paused, running his thumb over a seam in the hide. I left when I was 35. Haven't been back since. Lena wanted to ask why he'd left, what he was running from, but she knew better than to push. People who lived alone in the mountains didn't do it because they loved company. Instead, she said, Do you ever miss it? No. The answer came so quickly, so firmly, that Lena believed him. They worked until her hands were too sore to continue, then headed back to the cabin. Caleb made lunch, sandwiches with bread he'd baked himself and venison from the deer he'd brought in that morning. Lena ate without thinking about where the meat came from this time. Funny how hunger could quiet a conscience. That afternoon, while Caleb was outside checking his traps, Lena explored the cabin more thoroughly. The books on the shelves were a mix of practical manuals, wilderness survival, carpentry, animal husbandry, and fiction. Hemingway, Cormac McCarthy, some old westerns with cracked spines. She pulled out one of the westerns and flipped through it. The pages were yellowed, the margins filled with pencil notes in tight, careful handwriting. She was still reading when Caleb came back in, snow crusted on his shoulders. Any good? He asked, nodding at the book. Lena closed it. I don't know yet. Can I borrow it? You don't have to ask. Take whatever you want. She looked at him, surprised. You sure? It's just a book, Lena. It's not doing anybody any good sitting on a shelf. That night, after dinner, Lena sat by the fire and read while Caleb worked on repairing a snowshoe that had split down the middle. The silence between them was comfortable now, easy. It struck her how rare that was, being quiet with someone and not feeling like you had to fill the space with words. The baby was active that evening, rolling and kicking like it was training for something. Lena put a hand on her stomach, feeling the movements beneath her palm. Caleb glanced over at one point, his eyes following the motion, but he didn't say anything. After a while, Lena closed the book and said, Can I ask you something? Caleb looked up from the snowshoe. Go ahead. Why aren't you asking me questions? What do you mean? I mean, I show up half frozen on your doorstep, 7 months pregnant, clearly running from something, and you haven't asked me a single thing about it. Why not? Caleb set down his tools. Would it help if I did? Lena thought about that. Probably not. Then there's your answer. He picked up the snowshoe again, threading new rawhide through the frame. You'll tell me if you want to. If you don't, that's your business. It should have been a relief, but instead it made Lena's chest feel tight. She wasn't used to people respecting her boundaries. Wasn't used to people treating her like she had a right to privacy. His name was Victor, she said quietly. Caleb's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed their work. He didn't look at her. We met at a bar about a year ago. He was charming, funny, said all the right things. I knew better. I did. But I was tired of being alone, and he made me feel like maybe I didn't have to be. She paused, staring into the fire. I got pregnant. Wasn't planned, but it happened. He said he wanted to keep it. Said we'd figure it out together. And I believed him. But he didn't want to figure it out, Caleb said. Not once it got real. Lena's voice was flat now, drained of emotion. He started pulling away, staying out late, making excuses. Then he told me about his cousin, the logging job, the fresh start. Said we'd leave together, start over somewhere new. She laughed bitterly. I should have known. I should have seen it coming, but I wanted it to be true so badly that I ignored every sign. What happened at the station? We got there around noon. He said his cousin was picking us up, but we had to wait. So we waited. Hours. He kept checking his phone, getting more and more agitated. Then the last train came through, and he said he needed to grab something from the platform store. Except there was no store. And when I turned around, he was gone. On the train. Just gone. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "He's a coward." Yeah. Lena wiped at her eyes, angry at herself for crying. He is. And you're better off without him. Am I? The words came out sharper than she intended. I'm 38 years old, pregnant, broke, and homeless. I don't have a job. I don't have family. I don't have anything. How is that better? Caleb finally looked at her. His eyes were steady, unflinching. Because you're not with someone who'd leave you to freeze to death on a train platform. That's how. The truth of it hit her like a punch. Because he was right. Victor had left her to die. Maybe he hadn't put it in those words. Maybe he'd convinced himself she'd figure something out. But the end result was the same. He'd abandoned her in the middle of nowhere, in a snowstorm, pregnant and alone. And she'd survived anyway. I'm sorry, Caleb said after a moment. For what? That he did that to you. You didn't deserve it. Lena didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent so long believing that maybe she had deserved it, that she'd made bad choices, trusted the wrong people, failed in some fundamental way. That hearing someone say otherwise felt foreign. Thank you, she said quietly. Caleb nodded and went back to his work. The conversation was over, and Lena was grateful for that. She didn't want to talk about Victor anymore. Didn't want to think about him. The days began to blur together after that. Wake up, help with chores, eat, work, read, sleep, repeat. It was simple, almost monotonous, but there was a peace to it that Lena hadn't felt in years. No chaos, no drama, no wondering when the other shoe was going to drop. Caleb taught her things without making it feel like lessons. How to split firewood without hurting herself. How to tell if meat had gone bad. How to tie knots that would actually hold. Small, practical things that felt like gifts even though he never framed them that way. On the third day, this baby kicked hard enough that Lena gasped out loud. Caleb, who was sitting across the table fixing a lamp, looked up sharply. You okay? Lena nodded, catching her breath. Yeah, she's just active today. She? Yeah. Found out at my last appointment. Caleb's expression softened slightly. You got a name picked out? No, I keep trying, but nothing feels right. He nodded, like that made perfect sense, and went back to his work. That night, Lena woke to the sound of Caleb moving around the cabin. She opened her eyes and saw him standing by the window, staring out into the dark. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Caleb? She said softly. He turned, and for a second she saw something raw in his face. Grief, maybe, or regret. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual calm. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. You okay? Yeah, just... He rubbed a hand over his face. Bad dream. Lena sat up. You want to talk about it? No. She didn't push, just watched as he moved to the fireplace and added another log, even though the fire was still burning fine. After a moment, he sat down in the chair, staring into the flames. Lena got out of bed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and sat on the floor near the fire. Not close enough to crowd him, but close enough that he'd know he wasn't alone. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just existing in the same space. Eventually, Caleb's shoulders relaxed. His breathing evened out. I had a daughter once, he said quietly. Lena's heart clenched. Had. She died. Car accident. She was 6. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. Nothing that would make that kind of loss any less devastating. I'm sorry, she managed. Caleb nodded. Her mother, my ex-wife, she blamed me. Said I should have been driving. Maybe she was right. I don't know. We fell apart after that. Couldn't even look at each other without seeing what we'd lost. He paused, his jaw tight. I stayed for a while, tried to make it work. But eventually I realized I was just torturing us both. So I left. Came up here. Built this place. And I've been here ever since. Do you regret it? Leaving? No. Staying as long as I did? Yeah. Should have let her go sooner. Would have been kinder. Lena pulled the blanket tighter. Is that why you helped me? Because of your daughter? Caleb looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. Maybe. I don't know. I just... When I saw you on that porch, I thought about what would have happened if no one had helped. And I couldn't... He stopped, shaking his head. I couldn't let that happen. Lena's throat felt tight. I'm glad you didn't. They lapsed into silence again. Outside, the wind had finally started to die down. The storm was breaking. The next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in days. The sun came up sharp and bright, turning the snow into a field of diamonds. Lena stood on the porch, breathing in the cold, clean air, and felt something shift inside her. She could leave now. The storm was over. She could walk down to the road, hitch a ride to the nearest town, figure out her next move. That had been the plan, hadn't it? Wait out the storm, then go. But where would she go? She didn't have an answer to that. Caleb came out onto the porch, carrying an axe. He looked at her, then at the clear sky. Storm's done. Yeah. You'll want to head out soon. Roads will be passable by afternoon. Lena nodded. Yeah, I should. But neither of them moved. After a moment, Caleb said, or you could stay. Lena's heart kicked in her chest. What? Stay, for a while, until you figure out what's next. He shifted his weight, not quite meeting her eyes. I've got the space, and you're useful. More useful than I expected, honestly. It was the worst sales pitch Lena had ever heard, and also the most honest. I can't pay you, she said. Didn't ask you to. Then what? You work. You help around the place. That's payment enough. Lena stared at him. Why would you do that? Caleb finally looked at her. Because you need a place. And I could use the help. It's not charity, Lena. It's practical. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But it was the kind of lie that made the truth easier to swallow. Lena thought about it. Thought about going back down the mountain, back to a world that had never wanted her in the first place. Thought about her daughter, about trying to raise a kid with nothing and no one. Then she thought about the last 4 days, the warmth, the work, the quiet. Okay, she said. Caleb nodded like it was settled. Okay. He handed her the axe. Think you can split firewood without taking off a toe? Lena took the axe, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Guess we'll find out. They worked side by side that day, clearing snow, chopping wood, checking traps. And for the first time in longer than Lena could remember, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like living. Lena learned to move through the cabin and the surrounding woods with a confidence she hadn't known she was capable of. She learned which trees made the best firewood, how to skin a rabbit without ruining the pelt, how to read the sky for incoming weather. Caleb was a patient teacher, never condescending, never impatient. He showed her things once, maybe twice, then trusted her to figure out the rest. There were hard days. Days when her back ached so badly she could barely stand. Days when the baby pressed on her lungs and made it hard to breathe. Days when she thought about Victor and felt the rage rise up in her throat like bile. But there were good days too. Days when she and Caleb worked in easy silence, when the sun broke through the clouds and made the whole mountain look like something out of a painting. Days when she caught herself laughing at something stupid and realized it had been months since she'd laughed at all. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the storm, Lena was sitting on the porch mending a hole in one of Caleb's shirts when she heard the sound of an engine. She looked up, squinting into the distance. A truck was making its way up the road, old, battered, belching black smoke. Caleb came out of the shed, wiping his hands on a rag. He followed her gaze, his expression tightening slightly. "Who is it?" Lena asked. "Probably Dutch. He's the trader I sell pelts to. Comes up every few months." The truck pulled up in front of the cabin and a man climbed out. He was short and round, with a gray beard that looked like it had never seen a razor, and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Caleb, you old hermit," he called out, his voice booming. "Thought maybe you'd finally frozen to death up here." Caleb's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Not yet." Dutch's gaze shifted to Lena, and his eyebrows went up. "Well now, who's this?" "This is Lena," Caleb said. "She's staying here for a while?" Dutch looked between them, his smile widening. "Is that so?" "Well, hell, Caleb. Didn't think you had it in you." "It's not like that," Caleb said flatly. "Sure it's not." Dutch winked at Lena. "Don't let him fool you, sweetheart. He's got a heart under all that gruff. You just gotta dig for it." Lena found herself smiling despite herself. "I'll keep that in mind." Dutch and Caleb spent the next hour going over pelts, negotiating prices, trading supplies. Lena stayed on the porch, watching them. Dutch was loud and irreverent, teasing Caleb mercilessly, and Caleb tolerated it with the kind of exasperation that suggested this was a long-standing dynamic between them. Before Dutch left, he pulled Lena aside. "You doing okay up here?" he asked, his voice lower now, serious. Lena nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine." "He treating you right?" "He's been nothing but kind." Dutch studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Caleb's a good man. Better than most. But if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you let me know. I come through here regular." "Thank you," Lena said, surprised by the concern in his voice. Dutch tipped his hat and climbed back into his truck. As he drove away, Lena turned to find Caleb watching her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." He picked up a crate of supplies Dutch had left and headed inside. Lena followed. "He seems nice." "He's nosy." "He cares about you." Caleb set the crate down with more force than necessary. "He worries too much." Lena leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "Maybe he's got reason to." Caleb looked at her, and for a moment she thought he might actually open up. But then he just shook his head and started unpacking the supplies. That night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Lena said, "I've been thinking." Caleb glanced up from the knife he was sharpening. "About?" "About what happens after the baby comes." His hand stilled. "What about it?" "I don't know. I mean, I can't stay here forever. You didn't sign up for a crying baby keeping you up all night." "You planning to leave?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." Caleb went back to sharpening the knife. "You can stay as long as you need to, baby or no baby." "You say that now." "I mean it." Lena wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But another part, the part that had been burned too many times, kept waiting for the moment when his patience would run out. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Letting me stay. Helping me. You don't owe me anything." Caleb set the knife down and looked at her. "Maybe I'm not doing it because I owe you. Maybe I'm doing it because I want to." The simplicity of it took her breath away. No strings, no ulterior motives, just wanting to. "I don't know how to repay you," Lena said quietly. "Then don't. Just be here. That's enough." And somehow, impossibly, Lena believed him. The days continued to pass. Lena's belly grew rounder, her movements slower. Caleb started hovering more, though he tried to hide it, insisting she sit while he handled the heavier chores, making sure she ate enough, checking on her at night when he thought she was asleep. It should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her feel something she couldn't quite name. Something warm and terrifying all at once. One evening, she caught him carving something by the fire. When she asked what it was, he held it up, a small wooden rattle, smooth and perfectly shaped. "For the baby," he said simply. Lena's eyes stung. "Caleb, it's not a big deal. I had extra wood. But it was a big deal. It was the biggest deal in the world. She took the rattle, running her fingers over the polished surface. "Thank you." Caleb just nodded and went back to his work. That night, lying in bed, Lena held the rattle and felt the baby move inside her. And for the first time since Victor had left her on that platform, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. But hope, she would learn, was a fragile thing. And the past had a way of finding you, no matter how far you ran. The morning Victor came back started like any other. Lena was in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, while Caleb was outside chopping wood. The rhythmic thud of the axe had become a comforting sound over the past 6 weeks, a metronome that marked the passing of safe, predictable days. She'd fallen into the work easily, finding satisfaction in the simple act of making something with her hands. The dough was soft and pliable, dusted with flour that clung to her fingers and the swell of her belly. She was humming. She didn't even realize it until she caught herself mid-verse of some song she'd forgotten she knew. When had she started humming? When had the tightness in her chest finally loosened enough to let something like music back in? The baby shifted, a slow roll that made her pause and press a hand to her side. 8 months now, getting close. Dr. Chen, the physician Caleb had taken her to see in the nearest town 3 weeks ago, had said everything looked good, healthy, on track. Lena still couldn't quite believe it. After everything, after all the ways her body had failed her before, this one thing was working. She shaped the dough into a round and set it in the pan to rise, then wiped her hands on her apron. Through the window, she could see Caleb working, his breath misting in the cold morning air. He'd taken his coat off despite the temperature, his shirt sleeves rolled up. There was something almost meditative about the way he moved, efficient, unhurried, completely focused. Lena had stopped trying to figure him out weeks ago. He was who he was. A man who'd built a life out of silence and solitude, who helped without expecting gratitude, who treated her like she mattered without ever making it feel like a debt. She was pouring herself tea when she heard the second sound, an engine. Her hand froze on the kettle. They weren't expecting anyone. Dutch had been through just 2 weeks ago, and he never came back that quickly. Caleb had mentioned a few others who occasionally made the trek up the mountain, a forest ranger who checked in once a season, a guy who delivered propane, but none of them were due. Lena set the kettle down and moved to the window. A truck was coming up the road, newer than Dutch's beater, dark blue with out-of-state plates she couldn't quite make out from this distance. Outside, Caleb had stopped chopping. He was watching the truck too, the axe resting against his shoulder, his expression unreadable. The truck pulled up and stopped about 20 feet from the cabin. The engine cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door opened, and Victor Hale stepped out. Lena's heart stopped. He looked exactly the same. Same sandy hair, same leather jacket he thought made him look tough, same easy smile that had fooled her for months. He stood there for a moment, looking around like he was assessing the place, then his eyes found the cabin, found her in the window. His smile widened. Lana stumbled backward, her hip hitting the table hard enough to rattle the dishes. No, this wasn't happening. He couldn't be here. He'd left. He'd made his choice. He didn't get to just show up like nothing had happened, but he was here, walking toward the cabin like he owned it, like he owned her. Lena's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her stomach, trying to steady herself, trying to think. She needed to, what? Hide? Run? There was nowhere to run, and why should she run? This was Caleb's home. She had every right to be here. Victor had none. She heard Caleb's voice outside, low and hard. That's far enough. Lena moved back to the window. Caleb had positioned himself between Victor and the cabin, the axe still in his hand. Not threatening exactly, but not friendly either. Victor stopped, hands raised in mock surrender. Whoa. Easy there, mountain man. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then turn around and leave. Can't do that. But Victor's smile never wavered. I'm here for Lena. Caleb's grip on the axe tightened. She doesn't want to see you. Why don't we let her decide that? Lena didn't think. She just moved. Out the door, down the steps, into the cold without a coat. Both men turned to look at her. Victor's smile grew. Hey, baby. You look Wow, you look good. The casual affection in his voice made her want to scream. What are you doing here? I came to get you, to bring you home. Home. Like they'd had a home, like he hadn't abandoned her to freeze to death on a train platform 2 months ago. I don't have a home, Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. And if I did, it wouldn't be with you. Victor's smile flickered. Lena, come on. Don't be like that. I know I messed up, okay? I panicked, but I've been thinking about it, and you've been thinking about it. Lena's laugh was sharp, bitter. For 2 months, you've been thinking about it. Where were you thinking when I was sitting at that station in the dark? Where were you thinking when I nearly froze to death? I know I screwed up. Victor took a step closer. Caleb shifted, blocking him. Victor shot him an irritated look but kept talking. But I want to make it right. That's why I'm here. I want us to be a family. You left me. I made a mistake. You left me to die. Victor flinched. That's not... I knew you'd figure something out. You're smart. You're resourceful. I was pregnant and alone in the middle of a blizzard. But you're fine now. You made it, see? I knew you would. The audacity of it took her breath away. He was rewriting history in real time, turning his abandonment into some kind of test she'd passed, like he'd done her a favor. Get off this property, Lena said. Lena, get off. Victor's expression hardened. The charming mask slipped just enough to show what was underneath. You think you can just stay up here playing house with some random guy, raising my kid in the middle of nowhere? She's not your kid, Lena said. You gave up that right when you got on that train. The hell I did. That's my daughter. No, she's mine. Victor's jaw clenched. You can't keep me from my own child. Watch me. He lunged forward. Caleb moved faster, putting himself fully between them, the axe now held in both hands. Back up. Victor glared at him. This is none of your business. It became my business when you abandoned her on my mountain. Your mountain? Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who knows when to walk away. Caleb's voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. You should try it. Victor's hand moved to his hip, to the gun tucked into his waistband. Lena saw it the same moment Caleb did. Time seemed to slow, every detail suddenly sharp and clear. The way Victor's fingers curled around the grip. The way Caleb's weight shifted, ready. The way her own breath caught in her throat. Don't, Caleb said quietly. Victor pulled the gun anyway, didn't point it at anyone, just held it loose at his side. A threat. A reminder that he could. I'm not leaving without her, Victor said. Caleb didn't move. Didn't even blink. Yes, you are. You gonna stop me? You and that axe? If I have to. The certainty in Caleb's voice made Victor hesitate. Lena could see him calculating, trying to figure out if this mountain hermit was bluffing, trying to decide if his pride was worth bleeding over. Lena stepped forward, putting herself in Victor's line of sight. Look at me. Victor's eyes shifted to her. I'm not going with you, Lena said. Each word was deliberate, final. Not today, not ever. You made your choice 2 months ago. Now I'm making mine. You think this is a choice? Victor's laugh was ugly. You think you have options? You're broke. You're nobody. Without me, you're nothing. Once those words might have landed, might have burrowed into the soft parts of her and made a home there. But not anymore. Maybe, Lena said. But I'd rather be nothing without you than something because of you. Victor's face twisted. For a second, she thought he might actually use the gun, but then he seemed to deflate, some essential part of him collapsing inward. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Lena said quietly. It is. Victor looked at Caleb, then back at Lena. Whatever he saw in their faces made him realize he wasn't going to win this. Not today. Not like this. He shoved the gun back into his waistband. Fine. You want to play it this way? We'll play it this way. But when you're living in some shelter with a screaming baby and no money, don't come crying to me. I won't, Lena said. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then turned and stalked back to his truck. He slammed the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. The engine roared to life, spitting gravel as he reversed, then peeled out down the road. They watched until the truck disappeared around the bend, until even the sound of the engine faded into nothing. Then Lena's legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to sit in the snow. She wasn't crying, she was shaking too hard to cry. "Breathe," Caleb said. His hand was on her back, steady and warm. "Just breathe." Lena tried. Her lungs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. Everything was too sharp, too bright, too much. "He's gone," Caleb said. "He's gone, Lena. You're safe." Safe. The word felt foreign. She'd faced Victor down, she'd stood her ground. She'd chosen herself for maybe the first time in her entire life. So why did she feel like she was falling apart? "I thought I'd be stronger," she managed. "I thought, when I finally told him no, I thought I'd feel strong?" "Yeah." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Strength isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. You did that. You stood up to him. That took guts." "I was terrified." "I know. I could see it." He helped her to her feet, keeping a hand on her elbow until she was steady. "But you didn't back down. That matters." They walked back to the cabin in silence. Inside, Caleb guided her to the chair by the fire and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. He didn't hover, didn't ask if she was okay, just gave her space while he put the kettle on for tea. Lena pulled the blanket tighter, staring into the flames. Her mind was racing, replaying the confrontation over and over. The way Victor had looked at her like she was something he owned. The way he'd pulled that gun like it was nothing. The way Caleb had stepped in front of her without hesitation. "Would you have used it?" she asked suddenly. Caleb glanced over from the stove. "Used what?" "The axe. If he'd pointed that gun at me. Would you have used it?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Yes." No hesitation. No qualifiers. Just yes. "Why?" "Because some lines you don't cross, and threatening a pregnant woman is one of them." The simplicity of it should have been comforting. Instead, it made Lena's chest ache, because Caleb would have risked his life for her, a woman he'd known for 2 months, a woman who'd brought nothing but complication into his quiet, ordered world. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For bringing this to your door, for all of it." Caleb brought her the tea, pressing the warm mug into her hands. "You didn't bring anything. He did. And now he's gone. He said it wasn't over. People say a lot of things when they're losing." "You think he meant it?" Caleb sat down across from her, considering. "Maybe. But meaning something and doing something are different things. He's a coward, Lena. Cowards make noise when they can't get their way. But when it comes down to it, they fold." Lena wanted to believe that, but she'd seen something in Victor's eyes before he left. Something mean and desperate. "What if he comes back?" "Then we deal with it. We, not you. We." Lena sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "Why do you keep helping me?" Caleb leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the fire. "You keep asking me that." "Because I keep not understanding the answer." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "My daughter's name was Emma." Lena went still. "She was 6 when she died. Car accident, like I told you. But what I didn't tell you was that she was in the car because I put her there. I was supposed to pick her up from school, but I was running late, so I had my ex do it instead. She was on the phone with me when it happened, when the truck ran the red light." His voice was flat, emotionless, the kind of tone that came from telling a story so many times it stopped feeling real. "I heard the impact, heard Emma scream, then nothing." Lena's throat closed up. "Caleb, I couldn't save her," he continued. "Couldn't do a damn thing except listen while my whole world ended over a phone line. And I've spent the last 5 years thinking about that, about all the things I could have done differently, should have done differently." He looked at her then, and his eyes were raw. "I can't save Emma," he said. "But I can help you, so that's what I'm doing. Not because you owe me. Not because I want something from you. But because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." Lena didn't know what to say. There were no words big enough for what he'd just given her, so instead, she reached across the space between them and took his hand. Caleb looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. He didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time, the fire crackling between them, the silence heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Eventually, Caleb stood. "You should rest. You've had enough for one day." Lena nodded, too wrung out to argue. She went to the bed and lay down, still fully dressed. The baby was moving, restless and agitated, picking up on her stress. "It's okay," she whispered, hand on her belly. "We're okay." She didn't know if she believed it, but she said it anyway. Across the room, Caleb sat by the fire, the rifle now resting against his chair. He wasn't taking chances, and despite everything, that made Lena feel safer than she had in months. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. The next few days were tense. Caleb kept the rifle close, checked the perimeter of the property twice a day, listened for the sound of engines on the road. Lena tried to go about her routine, but everything felt fragile now, like one wrong move would shatter whatever peace they'd managed to build. She found herself watching the road too, jumping at every sound, waiting for Victor to make good on his threat. But he didn't come. A week passed, then two. Slowly, the tension began to ease. Maybe Caleb had been right. Maybe Victor had just been making noise. Lena wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. On the 15th day after the confrontation, Dutch showed up unannounced, his truck rattling up the road just after dawn. Caleb went out to meet him, and Lena watched from the window as the two men talked. Dutch's expression was serious, none of his usual jovial energy. He kept glancing at the cabin, at her. When they came inside, Dutch tipped his hat to Lena, but didn't smile. "What's wrong?" Lena asked. Dutch looked at Caleb, who nodded. "Saw a guy down in town asking questions about you," Dutch said. "Matches the description Caleb gave me. Blonde, leather jacket, driving a blue truck." Lena's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "Where you were. If anyone had seen you. He was flashing money around, trying to get people to talk." "Did anyone?" "Not that I heard. Most folks down there know Caleb. Know he keeps to himself. They're not going to rat him out to some stranger." Dutch scratched his beard. "But I wanted you to know. Guy's still sniffing around." Lena sank into a chair, her hands pressed to her stomach. The baby kicked, hard. Caleb's jaw was tight. "He say anything else?" "Just that he was looking for his girlfriend, that she was pregnant and confused, and he wanted to bring her home safe." Dutch snorted. "Nobody bought it. You can smell a liar from a mile off, and that boy reeked." "Thanks for the heads up," Caleb said. Dutch nodded, then looked at Lena. "You hang in there, sweetheart. Men like that? They're all bark. He'll get tired of looking eventually." Lena forced a smile. "Yeah, I hope so." After Dutch left, Caleb sat down across from her. "We need to be smart about this." "What does that mean?" "It means we stay alert. It means you don't go wandering off alone. It means if you see that truck, you get inside and you lock the door." "He's not going to give up, is he?" Caleb's silence was answer enough. Lena felt the walls closing in. She'd thought she was done running, thought she'd finally found a place to stop. But Victor was still out there, still hunting her, still trying to control her. "I should leave," she said quietly. Caleb's head snapped up. "What?" "I should leave before he finds this place, before he—" "No." "Caleb, no," he said again, firmer this time. "You're not running. Not from him. Not anymore. But if he comes back, we'll handle it. Together." Caleb leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You've spent your whole life running from men like him, making yourself smaller so they'll leave you alone. I'm telling you right now, that stops here." "I'm scared," Lena whispered. "I know, but you're also strong, stronger than you think, stronger than he'll ever be." Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the strength he saw in her, but all she felt was tired. "What if he hurts you?" she asked. Caleb's expression softened. "Then he hurts me, but I'm not letting him hurt you." The conviction in his voice broke something open inside her. Before she could stop herself, she was crying, big, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Caleb didn't try to fix it, didn't tell her to stop, just moved his chair closer and let her fall apart. When the tears finally subsided, Lena wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm a mess." "You're human." Caleb handed her a handkerchief. And you've been through hell. You're allowed to break a little. Lena took the handkerchief, pressing it to her eyes. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Stand up to him. Be strong. I've always just... You stood up to him once already, Caleb reminded her. You can do it again. What if I can't? Then I'll stand with you. And we'll do it together. Together. That word again. It shouldn't have meant so much. But it did. Lena nodded, straightening in her chair. Okay. Okay. They spent the rest of the day fortifying. Caleb moved the rifle to a spot near the door where it was easier to reach. He checked the locks on the windows, made sure the firewood was stocked. Lena helped where she could, though her movements were slower now, her belly heavy and cumbersome. That night, they ate dinner in silence. The weight of what was coming hung between them, unspoken but understood. Before bed, Caleb handed her a small knife, the handle worn smooth from use. Keep this under your pillow, he said. Lena took it, the weight of it unfamiliar in her hand. I don't know how to use this. Point the sharp end at the threat and push. That's all you need to know. It should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel just a little bit less powerless. She tucked the knife under her pillow and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Across the room, Caleb was still awake, sitting in his chair with the rifle across his lap. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, Get some sleep, Lena. Tomorrow's a new day. Lena closed her eyes, one hand on her belly, the other resting near the knife. And she waited. The contraction started 3 days later, just before midnight. Lena woke to a tightening across her belly that felt different from the Braxton Hicks she'd been having for weeks. Sharper, more insistent. She lay still for a moment, waiting to see if it would pass. It didn't. Instead, another one came, rolling through her like a wave. She sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her stomach. The cabin was dark, except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Caleb was asleep in his chair, his head tilted at an angle that was going to leave his neck sore in the morning. Lena didn't want to wake him. Not yet. Maybe this was nothing. Maybe it was just her body practicing, getting ready. Then her water broke. The sensation was unmistakable. A sudden release, warm liquid soaking through her nightgown and into the sheets. Lena froze, her breath catching in her throat. This was happening. This was really happening. Caleb, she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He was awake instantly, on his feet before she'd even finished saying his name. What's wrong? I think, Another contraction hit, harder this time, stealing her breath. I think the baby's coming. Caleb crossed to her in 3 strides, his hand going to her shoulder. How far apart are the contractions? I don't know, 5 minutes? Maybe less. He swore under his breath. Okay. We need to get you to the hospital. Lena shook her head, gripping his arm as another wave of pain rolled through her. There's no time, and She didn't have to finish. They both knew. Outside, a storm was building. Not like the one that had brought her here, but close. The wind had been picking up all day, and snow had started falling around dinner. By morning, the roads would be impassable. We can still try, Caleb said. I've got chains for the truck. Caleb, I can barely stand. I'm not going to make it down that mountain. He looked at her, and she saw the fear in his eyes, raw and real. This wasn't something he could fix with an axe or a rifle. This was beyond his control. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. Lena tried to smile, but another contraction was building. But we're going to have to figure it out. Caleb's jaw set. She could see him shifting gears, pushing the fear down, focusing on what needed to be done. Okay. Let's get you comfortable first. Can you walk? I think so. He helped her out of bed, supporting most of her weight as she shuffled toward the chair by the fire. Her legs felt weak, unreliable. The contractions were coming faster now, each one like a fist clenching around her entire midsection. Caleb grabbed blankets, pillows, anything soft he could find, and made a nest for her in the chair. Then he stoked the fire until it was blazing, filling the cabin with heat and light. What do you need? He asked. Tell me what to do. Lena tried to think. What did she need? She'd read about childbirth, sat through a prenatal class that Victor had skipped, but none of it had prepared her for this. For doing it alone, in a cabin, in the middle of a storm. Towels, she managed, clean towels, and water, lots of water. Caleb moved immediately, gathering supplies with the same methodical efficiency he brought to everything. He filled a pot with water and set it to boil. He pulled out every clean towel he had and stacked them within reach. He found the first aid kit and set it on the table, along with scissors and twine. Lena watched him work, trying to breathe through the contractions. They were coming every 3 minutes now, relentless and demanding. Her body was doing something she had no control over, and all she could do was hold on. "I need you to check," she said between contractions. "I need you to see how far along I am." Caleb's face went pale. "Lena, I know it's... but there's no one else. And I need to know." He stood there for a moment, clearly warring with himself. Then he nodded, washing his hands in the boiled water before kneeling in front of her. "Tell me what I'm looking for," he said. Lena walked him through it as best she could, her voice shaking. It was awkward and uncomfortable and terrifying, but Caleb didn't flinch, didn't make it weird, just did what needed to be done. When he pulled back, his expression was grim. "I can feel the head. You're close." Close. The word should have been comforting, but all Lena felt was panic. She wasn't ready. The baby wasn't supposed to come for another 3 weeks. She didn't have diapers or bottles or any of the things she was supposed to have. She didn't have a hospital or doctors or anything resembling a plan. "I can't do this," she gasped. Caleb gripped her hand hard enough that it hurt. "Yes, you can." "I'm not strong enough. You are. You've survived everything life's thrown at you. You can survive this." Another contraction hit, and Lena screamed. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, a tearing, ripping sensation that made her feel like she was being split in half. "Breathe," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the haze. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Come on, Lena. Breathe with me." She tried. Focused on his voice, on the rhythm he was setting. In, out, in, out. The contraction passed, leaving her shaking and drenched in sweat. "How long?" she asked. "How long what?" "How long does this last?" Caleb's expression was pained. "I don't know." Hours. It lasted hours. Time lost all meaning. There was only pain and the brief respites between contractions where Lena could catch her breath. Caleb stayed with her through all of it, holding her hand when she needed something to grip, wiping her face with a cool cloth, talking to her in that low, steady voice that kept her tethered to reality. "You're doing great," he said, even though they both knew she wasn't. She was a mess, crying and cursing and begging for it to be over. "I can't," she sobbed during one particularly brutal contraction. "I can't keep doing this." "You don't have a choice," Caleb said, and there was something almost kind in the bluntness of it. "That baby's coming whether you're ready or not. So you're going to keep going, because that's what you do. You keep going." Somewhere around 3 in the morning, everything changed. The contractions shifted, and with them came an overwhelming urge to push. "I need to push," Lena gasped. Caleb checked again, and this time when he looked up, there was something like hope in his eyes. Okay, the head's crowning. On the next contraction, I need you to push as hard as you can." Lena nodded, too exhausted to be scared anymore. When the next contraction came, she bore down with everything she had, feeling something give way inside her. "Good," Caleb said. "That's good." Again. She pushed again and again, each time feeling like she was going to break, like her body was going to tear itself apart. "I can see her," Caleb said, and there was wonder in his voice now. "I can see her head. Come on, Lena. One more." One more. She could do one more. Lena pushed, and suddenly there was a release, a sensation of something leaving her body. Then a sound, a thin, reedy cry that was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. "She's here," Caleb said, his voice thick. "She's here, Lena. You did it." Lena collapsed back in the chair, her whole body trembling. Caleb was moving quickly now, wiping the baby clean with one of the towels, checking her over with hands that shook slightly. "She's breathing," he said. "She's small, but she's breathing." He wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed her on Lena's chest. Lena looked down at her daughter for the first time, and everything else fell away. She was tiny, red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair plastered to her head. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her mouth open in an angry wail that said she was very much alive and very much unhappy about being evicted from her warm, comfortable home. "Hi," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby. I'm your mom." The baby's crying quieted slightly, like she recognized the voice. Lena pressed a kiss to her forehead, breathing in that newborn smell, blood and vernix and something indefinably sweet. Caleb was still working, delivering the placenta, making sure there were no complications. When he was satisfied, he cleaned Lena up as best he could, covering her with blankets. "You need to try to feed her," he said. "Skin to skin. It'll help her regulate her temperature." Lena nodded, fumbling with her nightgown. The baby latched on after a few tries, and the sensation was strange and uncomfortable and perfect all at once. Caleb sat back on his heels, looking at them both. His face was haggard, streaked with sweat and blood, but there was something soft in his expression, something that looked almost like pride. "You did good," he said quietly. "So did you." He shook his head. "I just caught her. You did all the work." Lena wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Her eyelids felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving nothing but bone-deep exhaustion. "Stay awake a little longer," Caleb said, noticing her eyes drooping, "just until I'm sure the bleeding stopped." Lena forced herself to focus, looking down at her daughter. She was still nursing, her tiny hand curled against Lena's chest. "I need to name her," Lena said. "You've got time." "No, I need to do it now. Because if something went wrong, if she didn't make it, this baby needed a name, needed to be more than just the baby." Lena thought about it, running through all the names she'd considered and discarded over the past months. None of them felt right. They were all borrowed from other people's lives, other people's stories. Then she looked at Caleb, at this man who'd saved her life twice now, who'd stayed with her through the worst night of her life without hesitation. "Emma," she said. Caleb's head jerked up. "What?" "I want to name her Emma. If you don't mind." Caleb's expression crumpled. For a moment he looked like he might cry. Then he swallowed hard and nodded. "I don't mind." "Emma Grace," Lena said, testing it out. "Grace was my mother's name." "Emma Grace," Caleb repeated. "It's a good name." Lena looked down at her daughter, at Emma, and felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This tiny, squalling person was hers, her responsibility, her future. And for the first time since finding out she was pregnant, Lena wasn't terrified. She was exhausted and sore and completely overwhelmed, but underneath it all, there was something else. Hope. The storm raged outside, battering the cabin walls, but inside it was warm and quiet. Caleb checked on them periodically, making sure Emma was feeding okay, making sure Lena wasn't hemorrhaging. He didn't hover, but he didn't leave either. Around dawn, Emma finally fell asleep, her tiny body going limp and heavy against Lena's chest. Caleb took her gently, placing her in a makeshift bassinet he'd fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets. "You need to sleep," he told Lena. "I can't. What if she—" "I'll watch her. If anything changes, I'll wake you." Lena wanted to argue, but her body was shutting down whether she liked it or not. She let Caleb help her to the bed, which he'd changed and remade while she'd been focused on Emma. "Thank you," she said as he pulled the blankets up around her. "For everything. I couldn't have—" "Sleep, Lena." She closed her eyes and was unconscious before Caleb had even stepped away from the bed. When she woke, gray afternoon light was filtering through the windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember why her body hurt so much. Then she heard the small snuffling sounds coming from the bassinet, and it all came rushing back. Emma. Lena sat up too quickly, wincing at the pain. Caleb was in his chair, whittling something, but his eyes were on the bassinet. "How long was I out?" Lena asked. 6 hours. She woke up once, about 2 hours ago. I changed her diaper. Well, I put a clean towel on her. We don't exactly have diapers. She fussed for a bit, but then she went back to sleep. Lena struggled out of bed, her legs shaky. Caleb moved to help her, but she waved him off. I've got it. She made it to the bassinet and looked down at her daughter. Emma was awake now, her eyes open and unfocused, staring at nothing in particular. When she saw Lena, her mouth opened in a tiny O. Hey, sweetheart, Lena whispered, picking her up. Emma was so light, so fragile. Lena was terrified she might break her. You're not going to break her, Caleb said, reading her mind. She's tougher than she looks. Lena carried Emma back to the chair and settled in to feed her. It was easier this time, Emma latching on almost immediately. While the baby nursed, Lena looked around the cabin. In the hours she'd been asleep, Caleb had cleaned everything, packed away the bloody towels, scrubbed the floor. The only evidence of what had happened was the exhaustion carved into his face. When did you sleep? Lena asked. I didn't. Caleb, I will. Later. He set down his whittling. She could see now that it was a small wooden bird, and looked at her. How are you feeling? Sore. Tired. Overwhelmed. Lena paused. Happy. Caleb smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Good. They sat in comfortable silence while Emma nursed. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world blanketed in fresh snow. Everything looked clean, new. We're going to need supplies, Caleb said after a while. Diapers, formula in case your milk doesn't come in fully, clothes. I can go down to town once the roads are clear. What if Victor? Let him try something. There was steel in Caleb's voice. I'm done being careful. He wants to show his face around here again. He'll regret it. Lena believed him, and the certainty of it, the knowledge that Caleb would protect her and Emma no matter what, made her feel safer than she'd felt in her entire life. Emma finished nursing and Lena burped her, patting her tiny back until she let out a surprisingly loud belch. Caleb laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. She's got opinions, he said. She gets that from me. Yeah, she does. Lena looked down at Emma, at her daughter's perfect little face, and felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than she had in the past year. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. How to be a mom. Nobody does. Not at first. You figure it out as you go. What if I screw it up? Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You will. Probably a lot. But you'll also get things right, and you'll love her. That's the important part. Everything else you learn. Did you? Learn? Some of it. Not all of it. Not enough. His voice went quiet. But what I did learn is that kids are resilient. They don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be there. Lena nodded, holding Emma a little closer. I can do that. I can be there. I know you can. The rest of the day passed in a blur of feeding and changing and sleeping in short bursts. Emma was a good baby, all things considered. She cried when she was hungry or uncomfortable, but mostly she just slept, curled up in her drawer bassinet like a little burrito. That evening, Caleb made soup and bread, bringing Lena a bowl while she sat with Emma in her lap. You need to eat, he said. Keep your strength up. Lena ate, even though she wasn't particularly hungry. Her body needed fuel, and she was feeding 2 people now. After dinner, Caleb pulled the chair close to the bassinet and just watched Emma sleep. There was something achingly tender about it, this gruff mountain man completely captivated by a newborn baby. You can hold her if you want, Lena said. Caleb looked up, startled. I don't. You delivered her. I think you've earned the right to hold her. He hesitated, then nodded. Lena picked Emma up carefully and placed her in Caleb's arms. He held her like she was made of glass, his large hands cradling her tiny body. Emma stirred, then settled, her hand wrapping around Caleb's finger. His breath caught. She's so small, he said. She was early. Doc Chen said she'd be small. Caleb didn't respond. He was too busy staring at Emma, his expression caught somewhere between wonder and grief. Lena knew he was thinking about his own daughter, about Emma, the first Emma, about all the moments he'd lost. Thank you, Lena said softly, for giving me permission to use the name. Caleb's eyes were bright when he looked up. Thank you for asking. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them, while the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside. It wasn't a perfect moment. Lena was sore and exhausted. Caleb was haunted by ghosts, and Emma was probably going to wake up screaming in another hour. But it was theirs. And that was enough. Eventually, Emma started to fuss, and Caleb handed her back to Lena. I should let you rest. Both of you. You should rest too. I will. But Lena knew he wouldn't. He'd sit in that chair all night, keeping watch, making sure they were safe, and she loved him for it. The thought caught her off guard. Love. When had that happened? When had Caleb Rourke gone from a stranger who'd saved her life to someone she couldn't imagine living without? Maybe it had been gradual. Maybe it had been all at once. Lena didn't know. But as she looked at him now, at this man who'd given her everything and asked for nothing in return, she knew it was true. She loved him, and that terrified her almost as much as childbirth had. Emma was 3 weeks old when Victor came back. Lena was in the rocking chair Caleb had built for her, nursing Emma in the afternoon light when she heard the truck. The sound made her freeze, her whole body going rigid. She knew that engine, had heard it enough times in the past year to recognize it anywhere. Caleb was at the table cleaning the rifle, his hands stilled. Their eyes met across the room. Take her to the bedroom, he said quietly. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you to. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say she could face Victor, that she wasn't afraid anymore, but Emma was in her arms, small and defenseless, and keeping her safe was more important than proving a point. She stood, clutching Emma close, and moved toward the bedroom. Before she closed the door, she looked back at Caleb. He was loading the rifle, his movements calm and practiced. Don't do anything stupid, she said. Caleb's mouth twitched. I'll try. Lena shut the door and turned the lock. Her hands were shaking. Emma had finished nursing and was now staring up at her with those unfocused newborn eyes, completely unaware of the danger outside. It's okay, Lena whispered, even though she didn't believe it. We're okay. She could hear voices now, Caleb's, low and even, Victor's rising in anger. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew what Victor wanted. Emma started to fuss, picking up on Lena's tension. Lena bounced her gently, shushing her, but her own heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Then the shouting got louder. Lena pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. Not your kid, Victor was yelling. She's mine. I have rights. You gave up your rights when you left her to die. Caleb's voice was steel wrapped in ice. That's not... I made a mistake, okay? People make mistakes, and people live with consequences. You can't keep me from my daughter. Watch me. There was a crash, like furniture being overturned. Emma's fussing turned into full-blown crying. Lena's breath came in short gasps. She wanted to go out there, wanted to stand between Caleb and Victor, wanted to end this once and for all. But Emma was crying, and Lena was all she had. She paced the small bedroom, bouncing Emma, trying to soothe her while her own panic threatened to consume her. Minutes dragged by like hours. The voices outside rose and fell, punctuated by sounds she couldn't identify. Then, silence. Lena stopped pacing, her whole body tense. What did silence mean? Who had won? Was Caleb okay? Was Victor gone? The minutes stretched. Emma's crying subsided to hiccups, then to silence. Lena stood frozen, waiting, barely breathing. Then there was a knock on the door, 3 sharp raps. Lena, Caleb's voice. You can come out. She unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped into the main room. Caleb was standing in the middle of the cabin, the rifle in one hand. His lip was split, bleeding, and there was a bruise forming on his jaw. But he was standing. Victor was gone. What happened? Lena asked. Caleb set the rifle down and touched his lip gingerly. He took a swing. I put him on his ass. Then I told him if he came back, I'd make sure he didn't walk away next time. That's it? That's it. Lena looked around the cabin. A chair was on its side, the table was askew, but otherwise everything was intact. He just left? He's a coward, Lena. Like I said before. He makes noise, but when someone actually stands up to him, he folds. Caleb moved to the sink and splashed water on his face. He's done. I made sure of it. Lena wanted to believe him, but she'd seen something in Victor's eyes the last time he'd been here. Something desperate and mean. What if he's not done? She asked quietly. Caleb turned to look at her, water dripping from his face. Then I'll handle it, however many times it takes. Emma chose that moment to let out a wail, breaking the tension. Lena rocked her automatically, but her eyes stayed on Caleb. You're bleeding, she said. It's nothing. Let me clean it. Caleb started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. He sat down while Lena put Emma in the bassinet and fetched the first aid kit. She dabbed at his split lip with a clean cloth, wiping away the blood. You shouldn't have fought him, she said. He didn't give me much choice. You could have just… What? Let him push me around? Let him think he could come in here and take what he wanted? Caleb caught her wrist gently, stopping her. That's not how this works, Lena. You draw a line. You hold it. That's all you can do. Lena set the cloth down. What if holding the line gets you killed? Then at least I held it. The simplicity of his worldview should have been frustrating. Instead, it made her want to cry. Because Caleb would hold that line, would stand between her and Victor until one of them broke. And she couldn't let that happen. I should go, she said. Caleb's expression darkened. We've had this conversation. Not to run, to end this. Lena took a breath. I need to face him, really face him. Tell him to his face that it's over, that he has no claim on me or Emma, that if he doesn't leave us alone, I'll… She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. You'll what? I don't know. But I'll figure it out. I can't keep hiding. I can't keep waiting for him to show up. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to Emma. Caleb stood, towering over her. You think I care about fair? You think that's why I'm doing this? Then why are you doing it? The words hung between them, heavy with questions Lena had been too afraid to ask. Why had he let her stay? Why had he fought for her? Why had he helped her bring Emma into the world and then stayed up nights making sure they were both safe? Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, he looked like he might actually answer. Then Emma started crying again, and the moment shattered. Lena picked up her daughter, soothing her with practiced ease. When she looked up, Caleb was already turning away, grabbing his coat. I'm going to check the perimeter, he said. Make sure he's actually gone. Then he was out the door before Lena could say anything else. She stood there, holding Emma, feeling like something important had just slipped through her fingers. The next few days were tense. Caleb barely spoke, throwing himself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He fixed things that didn't need fixing, chopped enough wood to last 3 winters, spent hours checking and rechecking the traps. Lena tried to give him space, but it was hard in a one-room cabin. They circled each other like wary animals, careful not to touch, not to acknowledge the thing that had almost been said. Emma was the only bright spot, the only thing that felt uncomplicated. She was growing, filling out, becoming more alert. She'd started making sounds, little coos and gurgles that made Lena's heart swell. Caleb still carved things for her in the evenings, little toys and rattles, but he kept his distance otherwise. It was killing Lena, this careful, painful distance. On the 4th day, she'd had enough. Caleb was outside splitting wood, the axe rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Lena bundled Emma in blankets and stepped onto the porch. We need to talk, she called out. Caleb didn't stop. About what? You know what? The axe came down, splitting the log in 2. Caleb set another piece on the stump. There's nothing to talk about. The hell there isn't. Lena came down the steps, careful on the packed snow. You've been avoiding me for 4 days. I've been working. You've been hiding. That made him stop. He turned to look at her, the axe still in his hands. Hiding from what? From this. From us. From whatever it was you were about to say before Emma started crying. Caleb's jaw clenched. You don't want to have this conversation. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Because if we have it, things change. And maybe you're not ready for that. Lena shifted Emma in her arms. Maybe I am. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he set the axe down and walked toward her, closing the distance between them. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough. I care about you, Lena. More than I should. More than is smart. And I'm trying real hard not to make this complicated, because you've got enough on your plate without me adding to it. Lena's heart was racing. What if I want it to be complicated? You don't know what you want. You just got out of a nightmare with Victor. You're exhausted and overwhelmed and I love you. The words came out before she could stop them. They hung in the cold air, impossible to take back. Caleb went very still. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. You don't love me. You love the idea of safety, of someone taking care of you. But that's not the same thing. Lena felt anger flash through her. Don't tell me what I feel. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need you to protect me from my own feelings. Her voice rose, making Emma startle. Lena lowered it, bouncing the baby. I know what I feel, Caleb. I'm not some confused kid. I'm a grown woman who's made plenty of mistakes, and I know the difference between gratitude and love. Do you? Yes, because I was grateful to Victor too at first, grateful that someone wanted me. But I never loved him, not really. I know what that felt like, hollow and desperate and wrong. She took a breath. This isn't that. This is your... She couldn't find the words, didn't know how to explain that Caleb had shown her what kindness looked like without conditions, what strength looked like without cruelty, what home felt like when it wasn't built on lies. Caleb's expression softened. Lena, I'm not asking you to love me back, she said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know. I need you to stop treating me like I'm fragile, like I don't know my own mind. Caleb reached out, his hand cupping her face. His thumb brushed her cheek, gentle and careful. I do love you back. That's the problem. Lena's breath caught. How is that a problem? Because I'm 20 years older than you, because you're vulnerable right now, because I don't want to be another man who takes advantage. You're nothing like Victor. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Lena leaned into his touch. Victor took. You give. Victor demanded. You ask. Victor made me small. You make me... She paused, searching for the right word. Brave. You make me brave. Caleb's eyes were bright. You were always brave. You just didn't see it. Then help me see it. Stay with me. Not because I need you to, but because you want to. For a moment, Lena thought he might pull away, might retreat back into that careful distance. But then he leaned down and kissed her, soft and tentative, like he was afraid she might break. Lena kissed him back, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into it, the gratitude, the hope, the love. Emma squirmed between them, making a noise of protest. They broke apart, laughing despite everything. She's got opinions, Caleb said, echoing what he'd said weeks ago. She gets that from me. Yeah, she does. They stood there on the porch, the three of them, while the sun broke through the clouds and turned the snow to silver. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this was perfect. But it was real, and it was theirs. And that was enough. 2 weeks later, Victor came back one last time. Lena was outside hanging laundry when she heard the truck. She turned, her heart sinking, and saw it coming up the road, that same blue truck that had haunted her nightmares. But this time, she didn't run. She called for Caleb, who came out of the shed with the rifle. But Lena shook her head. This is mine, she said. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. He nodded, staying on the porch but keeping the rifle close. Victor parked and got out. He looked worse than he had before, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a manic energy that made Lena's skin crawl. I'm not leaving without my daughter, he said without preamble. Lena set down the laundry basket. She's not your daughter. The hell she's not. I'm her father. Being a father is more than biology, Victor. It's showing up. It's staying. It's loving someone more than you love yourself. Lena kept her voice steady, even. You don't know how to do any of those things. You can't just... I can. I am. Lena took a step forward. You left me on a train platform in the middle of winter. You left me to die. That baby you're so desperate to claim, you abandoned her before she was even born. I made a mistake. No. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. Lena's hands were steady now, her voice clear. I choose her. I choose this life. I choose to raise my daughter somewhere safe, with someone who actually cares about her. And that's not you. Victor's face twisted. You think this is over? You think you can just... Yeah, I do. Because you're a coward, Victor. You always have been. You run when things get hard. You lie when the truth is inconvenient. And you abandon people when they need you most. She paused, letting the words sink in. Emma deserves better than that. I deserve better than that. You're nothing without me. You're right. Lena smiled, and it was genuine. I was nothing with you. But now, I'm a mother. I'm someone who survived. I'm someone who knows what real love looks like. And it doesn't look like you. Victor stared at her, and Lena could see the moment he realized he'd lost. Really lost. Not because Caleb had beaten him or threatened him, but because Lena had chosen to walk away. Fine, he spat. Keep her. See how long you last up here with nothing. Longer than I would have lasted with you. Victor got back in his truck, but before he drove away, he looked at her one last time. You're making a mistake. No, Lena said quietly. I already made my mistake. This is me fixing it. The truck roared to life and peeled out, kicking up snow and gravel. Lena watched it go, watched it disappear around the bend, and felt something inside her finally let go. When she turned back to the cabin, Caleb was watching her with an expression that was equal parts pride and relief. You okay? He asked. Lena nodded. Yeah, I am. And she meant it. That night, after Emma was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Lena and Caleb sat by the fire. He had his arm around her, and she was leaning into his warmth, feeling more at peace than she had in years. What happens now? Caleb asked. Lena thought about it. I don't know. I need to figure out work eventually. Money. All the practical stuff. Dutch mentioned he could use help with his trading business. Bookkeeping, inventory. You could do it from here, mostly. You talked to Dutch about me? Caleb shrugged. I figured you'd want options. Lena smiled, pressing a kiss to his jaw. Thank you. For what? For thinking about my future, for giving me options, for... She paused. For everything. Caleb tightened his arm around her. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I want to. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Then Lena said, I want to stay. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this, you, Emma, this life, it's what I want. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Caleb looked at her, and Lena saw love in his eyes. Real love. The kind that didn't demand or control or suffocate. The kind that made space for her to be herself. Then stay, he said simply. So she did. The weeks turned into months. Winter gave way to spring, and Emma grew from a tiny newborn into a chunky, babbling baby who smiled at everything and everyone. Lena took on the bookkeeping work for Dutch, which was enough to keep her from feeling completely dependent on Caleb. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Caleb taught her more about living on the mountain, how to hunt, how to preserve food, how to read the weather. Lena taught him about letting people in, about accepting help, about building a family out of choice rather than blood. They fought sometimes. About small things, mostly. Who left the firewood out? Whether Emma needed another blanket. How much time Caleb spent alone in the woods. But they always came back together, always found their way through it. On Emma's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Just the three of them, plus Dutch, who brought a cake that was lopsided but delicious. Emma smashed her slice into her face, giggling, and Lena took a picture with the old camera Caleb had found in town. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lena stood on the porch and looked out at the mountains. A year ago, she'd been at that train station, alone and terrified, convinced her life was over. Now she was here. Not because she'd been rescued, but because she'd chosen to save herself, and in the process, she'd found something she'd never expected. Home. Caleb came out to join her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. You'll catch cold. I'm fine. He stood beside her, and they looked out at the valley together. You thinking about running? He asked, only half joking. Lena laughed. No, I'm thinking about staying. Good. because I wasn't planning to let you go." She leaned into him, feeling his warmth and strength and steadiness. "I love you, you know." "I know, I love you too." It was simple. It was true. It was everything. Inside, Emma started to cry, probably having a bad dream. Lena moved to go to her, but Caleb stopped her. "I'll get her, but," he said, "you've been on your feet all day." He disappeared inside, and a moment later, Lena heard his low voice soothing Emma. The crying stopped, replaced by Emma's happy babbling. Lena smiled and looked up at the stars. They were bright tonight, scattered across the sky like diamonds. She'd been abandoned once, left behind like she didn't matter, but she'd survived. More than that, she'd built a life, a real life, with people who chose her every single day. And for the first time since she could remember, Lena Voss felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The mountains stretched out before her, vast and wild and beautiful. And somewhere in that wilderness, she'd found herself. She'd found home.